Get out of the car. Now. What did I do? Big, black, and dangerous. That's what you did. Harlan Vale stepped out with his hands raised. I'm a United States Marine. A Marine? All I see is a dog off his leash. The deputy kicked Harlan's feet apart. Just look at my ID. I don't need your ID. I got eyes. And my eyes tell me exactly what you are. People stared. Nobody stopped. Harlan pressed his face against the cold hood, jaw locked tight, every muscle in his body trained to fight. Yet he did not move. What Deputy Clyde Barlow had no way of knowing was that the man he had just called a dog would soon have a 4-star general standing at full attention for him before that same night ended. To understand what happened on that road, you need to know who Harlan Vale really is. Harlan grew up in Ridgeway, Virginia. Small town, quiet streets, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and your mama's name too. His mother, Evelyn, worked the cafeteria line at Ridgeway Elementary for more than 2 decades. Hairnet on before dawn, home long after dark. 3 boys raised on a cashier's wage and a stubborn refusal to ask anyone for help. Harlan was the middle child, the quiet one. While his older brother chased trouble and his younger brother chased girls, Harlan chased structure. He wanted rules. He wanted purpose. And he found both the day he walked into a Marine recruiter's office right after high school. He signed the papers the same week he graduated. Evelyn cried the entire drive to the bus station. She packed him a brown bag lunch the way she always had for school: turkey sandwich, an apple, and a napkin with "I'm proud of you" written in her own handwriting. That napkin stayed folded in his wallet through every year of service that followed. Boot camp broke a lot of men. It never broke Harlan. He thrived on the discipline, the brotherhood, the clean clarity of knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. He moved through the ranks like a man born for it. Still young, he had already deployed twice, once to Iraq, once to Afghanistan. But it was his 3rd deployment that changed everything. Helmand Province. The heat was crushing, well over 100 degrees even in the shade. Harlan's squad was pushing through a narrow valley when the first round cracked overhead. Then the second. Then the whole ridgeline lit up. 2 Marines went down in the first 10 seconds. Corporal Brent Ellison took a round through his right leg. Private First Class Cody Hart caught shrapnel across his back. Both men were pinned in the open. No cover, no way to move, while enemy fire poured in from 3 directions. Every man in that unit knew the math. Going out there meant dying. Harlan went anyway. He sprinted 400 meters of open ground, bullets kicking dirt at his feet. He grabbed Ellison first, 220 pounds of dead weight, and dragged him behind a crumbled wall. Then he went back through the same kill zone, under the same fire, and pulled Hart out too. Still not finished, while the rest of the squad laid down suppressive fire, Harlan flanked the ridgeline alone. He moved through the rocks like a ghost and destroyed the enemy position with a precision his commanding officer later called the most extraordinary act of combat he had witnessed in 30 years of service. For that, Harlan Vale received the Medal of Honor. The ceremony was held at the White House. The president placed the pale blue ribbon around his neck while Evelyn stood in the front row, crying into the same hands that had once packed that brown bag lunch. A 4-star general, Sterling Hawthorne, commanding general of Marine Forces Command, was the one who pinned the medal. After the ceremony, Hawthorne pulled him aside and spoke 5 words Harlan never forgot. "You're the best of us." From that day on, Hawthorne became more than a general. He became a mentor. A phone call on every birthday. a handwritten letter after every promotion. The kind of bond that forms only when one man watches another run into certain death and come back alive. Harlan served several more years after the medal. Then he retired, not because he was tired of the corps, but because he felt a pull toward something else. The kids back in Ridgeway, the ones growing up the way he had, no father, not much money, and a world that had already decided what they were before they ever had a chance to show it. So he started volunteering at a youth mentorship program at the Haverford County Community Center. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he stood in front of a room of teenagers and taught them discipline, respect, and how to believe in themselves when nobody else would. That evening, Harlan had just finished a session with the kids. He had brought his Medal of Honor to show them. It now rested in its small black case in the glove compartment. He was driving home through Briarwood Estates, a wealthy, mostly white neighborhood, simply to avoid construction on the main route. Windows up, headlights on, speed exactly the limit, listening to an audiobook. Then the red and blue lights appeared in his mirror. To understand how the stop went so wrong, you have to see it from both sides. Deputy Clyde Barlow had been with the Haverford County Sheriff's Department for many years, stocky build, buzz cut that had never changed since the academy, and a reputation that depended entirely on who you asked. To the residents of Briarwood Estates, he was the man who kept things safe, drove through twice a shift, waved at the old ladies, parked his cruiser at the entrance so people could sleep easy. To the department's internal affairs office, he was a different story. 3 excessive force complaints over the years, every one of them dismissed without external review. A pattern anyone paying attention should have caught. Nobody was paying attention because Sheriff Doyle Griffin believed in one thing above all else: results. And Barlow got results, or at least the numbers said he did. What the numbers never said was how he got them. Barlow had a method he called instinct. Other people had a different word for it. He would cruise neighborhoods after dark, watching for anything that felt off. And more often than not, what felt off to Clyde Barlow was a black or brown face in a place he did not think it belonged. He never wrote that down, of course. On paper, it was always something else: a broken taillight, a suspicious lane change, a vehicle matching a description. Tonight, the excuse was thinner than usual. Briarwood Estates had been dealing with a string of car break-ins. Residents were rattled. The neighborhood Facebook group burned with posts about suspicious strangers and demands for more patrols. Sheriff Griffin had told Barlow to increase his presence. So when Barlow saw a black Ford F-150 entering Briarwood from the South Access Road at dusk, driven by a black man in a gray hoodie, his radio was in his hand before his brain finished the thought. "I got a visual on a suspicious vehicle," Barlow said into the receiver. "Black male, dark truck, entering Briarwood from the south. Let's light him up." On the other end was Deputy Reed Lawson, lean build, nervous energy he tried to hide by copying Barlow's swagger. Lawson had been paired with Barlow for months and had learned one unspoken rule: don't question Clyde. Lawson pulled his cruiser behind Barlow's. The 2 vehicles boxed in the black truck, lights flashing, sirens off. The kind of stop that looks routine from the outside. Nothing about this was routine. Harlan saw the lights in his rearview mirror. He did not panic. He did not speed up. He did what years of military training had drilled into him. He controlled the situation by controlling himself. He pulled over, turned off the engine, switched on the interior light so the officers could see inside the cab, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and waited. His heart rate never changed. He had been in ambushes in Helmand. A traffic stop in Virginia was not going to rattle him. Barlow approached from the driver's side. Lawson hung back on the passenger side, flashlight sweeping the interior. Standard positioning, except Barlow's hand was already on his holster. Not standard. Barlow did not introduce himself, did not state his name, did not give a reason for the stop. He simply shone the flashlight straight into Harlan's face and held it there. The light was blinding. Harlan squinted, but never raised a hand to block it. He knew better. License and registration. No, sir. No good evening. Just a command. Yes, officer, Harlan said. I'm going to reach into my back pocket for my wallet. Slowly. You bet you will, slowly. Harlan pulled out his wallet, extracted his Virginia driver's license and the registration from the visor, and handed both through the window. Barlow looked at the license, looked at Harlan, looked back at the license. He held it under the light as if searching for a forgery. Everything was clean. No warrants, no priors. Registration matched the truck. Truck matched the plates. There was nothing here. Any reasonable officer would have handed the documents back and said, "Have a good night." Barlow did not hand them back. Harlan Vale, he read aloud, as if the name itself were a joke. So what are you doing in Briarwood, Harlan? Taking a shortcut, officer. The construction on the main road. A shortcut? Barlow cut him off, leaning into the window frame. Harlan could smell coffee and chewing tobacco on his breath. Through Briarwood, after dark, in a hoodie. Harlan said nothing. There was nothing to say. The implication was clear, and answering it would only make things worse. Barlow held the silence a long moment, then keyed his radio and ran the plates. The answer came back clean in under a minute. Registered owner, Harlan Vale. No stolen vehicle reports. No flags. Barlow stared at the radio as if it had betrayed him. Lawson appeared at the passenger window and tapped the glass lightly. Plates are clean, Clyde. Registration matches. We good? Barlow never looked at him. He was still staring at Harlan. The flashlight had not moved from his face. No, Barlow said quietly. We're not good. He straightened, adjusted his belt, and spoke the words that turned a bad stop into a disaster. Step out of the vehicle. Harlan's hands remained on the wheel. Officer, may I ask why? My documents are in order. I haven't committed a violation. You're being asked to exit the vehicle as part of an active investigation. Step out. Now. What investigation, sir? Barlow leaned back in, close enough that Harlan could feel the heat off his skin. You want to play lawyer with me, boy? I said get out. Harlan took a slow breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The same technique he had taught himself in a foxhole when mortar rounds were landing close enough to kill. He opened the door, stepped out slowly, hands visible at all times. The evening air touched his skin, cool and sharp. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. The red and blue lights from both cruisers washed across the manicured lawns of Briarwood Estates like paint thrown at a clean wall. Barlow pointed to the hood of the truck. Hands on the hood. Spread your feet. Harlan complied. The metal was still warm from the engine. He placed his palms flat and felt the heat soak into his fingers. A silver Lexus rolled past slowly. An elderly white couple inside. The woman in the passenger seat craned her neck to look. The man driving stared straight ahead. They did not stop. Barlow waved them along without looking. Nothing to see here, folks. Routine stop. Routine. That word hung in the air as Harlan Vale, Medal of Honor recipient, decorated combat veteran, mentor to at-risk youth, stood spread-eagle against his own truck in a neighborhood where his only crime was existing. Behind him, Lawson shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He opened his mouth as if about to speak, then closed it again. And this was only the beginning. What happened next took less than 15 minutes, yet for Harlan, standing against that truck with his palms flat on the hood. It stretched into eternity. Barlow circled behind him slowly, boots crunching on the gravel, taking his time the way a man does when he knows he holds all the power and wants you to feel it. "So here's what I think," Barlow said. His voice was casual, almost friendly. That was the worst part. "I think you're not taking a shortcut. I think you're scouting. We've had break-ins all over this neighborhood, and then you show up. Big guy, dark truck, after dark, wearing a hoodie." "I'm driving home from a community center," Harlan said. "I volunteer there. I work with kids." "You work with kids?" Barlow repeated it as if it were the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. "Doing what? Teaching them how to case houses?" Harlan did not answer. He stared at the hood of his truck, at the reflection of the red and blue lights rippling across the black paint. He focused on his breathing, steady, controlled. Barlow leaned in close behind him. "I'm going to search your vehicle." "On what grounds, officer?" "I smell marijuana." There it was, the oldest trick in the book. 3 words that gave a cop permission to tear apart a man's entire life without a warrant, without evidence, without anything except his own word against yours. "There is no marijuana in my vehicle," Harlan said. "I don't use drugs. I never have." "Well, my nose says different. And last time I checked, my nose has a badge." Barlow walked to the truck and began his search. He was not looking for anything. That was obvious from the way he moved. He was not careful. He was not systematic. He was making a mess on purpose. He pulled Harlan's gym bag from behind the seat and threw it onto the road. The zipper burst open. A towel, a water bottle, and a change of clothes spilled across the asphalt. Barlow stepped on the shirt as he walked past. He grabbed Harlan's jacket from the passenger seat and tossed it into the dirt. He rifled through the center console, threw a phone charger and a pack of gum onto the floor, opened the backseat storage, and dumped a box of supplies: markers, name tags, printed worksheets from the youth mentorship program, across the back seat like garbage. Harlan watched over his shoulder. Every item that hit the ground was something he had packed that morning with care. Every toss, every throw, every careless slam was a message. You don't matter. Your things don't matter. You are nothing. Lawson stood beside Harlan, silent, flashlight pointed at the ground. After a long pause, he spoke quietly, almost a whisper. "So, Marine, huh? What unit?" Harlan glanced at him. "2nd Battalion, 6th Marines." "How many deployments?" 4. 2 Iraq, 2 Afghanistan. Lawson nodded slowly, lips pressed together as if he wanted to say something larger, something that mattered. But the words would not come. Inside the truck, Barlow had reached the glove compartment. He popped it open, pulled out the vehicle manual, a small flashlight, a tire pressure gauge, and then a small black case about the size of a hardback book, heavier than it looked. Barlow held it up, turned it over in his hands, and flipped it open. Inside, resting on a bed of dark blue velvet, was the Medal of Honor, a 5-pointed gold star hanging from a pale blue ribbon with 13 white stars, the most sacred military decoration in the United States of America. Fewer than 3,500 people in the entire history of the nation have ever received it. Barlow stared at it. He did not recognize it. He had no idea what he was holding. "What the hell is this?" Harlan turned his head, saw the case in Barlow's hand, and for the first time that night, something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Something deeper. Something that lived in the place where a man keeps the things he would die for. "That is the Medal of Honor, Deputy. It was presented to me by the President of the United States." Barlow looked at the medal, looked at Harlan, then back at the medal, and laughed. "Right." He held the case up toward Lawson. "Hey, Lawson, come look at this. Our friend here says the president gave him a little necklace." Lawson took one look at the case. His face went pale. Because unlike Barlow, Lawson recognized it. He had seen one in a glass case at the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico when he was 12 years old on a field trip. He remembered the tour guide saying you could count on your fingers how many living recipients there were. "Clyde," Lawson said, voice tight. "Clyde, I think that's real." "Real?" Barlow snorted. He snapped the case shut. "This is some kind of gang medallion, probably worth $50 at a pawn shop." He tossed the case back into the glove compartment. It bounced off the edge and fell onto the floor of the truck. Harlan closed his eyes. The Medal of Honor. The same medal the president had placed around his neck. The same medal his mother had touched with trembling fingers, while tears ran down her cheeks. The same medal that represented the two men he had carried through gunfire and the enemy position he had destroyed alone, tossed into the footwell of his truck like a piece of junk. Barlow walked back to Harlan, got right in his face, close enough that Harlan could count the broken blood vessels in the whites of his eyes. "Here's what I think. I think you stole this truck. I think you're casing this neighborhood. And I think that medal is as fake as your little Marine story. I would like to speak with your supervisor." "You're looking at him. I'm the senior officer on shift tonight. So whatever you think is going to save you, it's not coming." Barlow grabbed Harlan's arm, twisted it behind his back, and shoved him harder against the truck. Harlan's cheek hit the metal. "Stop resisting," Barlow barked. Harlan was not resisting. His body was completely still. His arms were limp. His legs were steady. There was no resistance. But Barlow needed that word for the report he was already writing in his head. "Clyde." Lawson stepped forward. "He's not resisting. He's not doing anything. Maybe we should just—" I said, "Cuff him, Lawson. Now." Lawson's hands were shaking. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt, stepped forward, and looked at Harlan. Harlan met his eyes. Did not say a word, did not plead, did not beg. Just looked at him with the kind of stillness that only comes from a man who has faced real death and survived. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, cold steel against warm skin. Barlow grabbed Harlan by the shoulder, walked him to the back of the cruiser, opened the door, and pushed his head down. Harlan sat on the hard plastic bench. The cage separating the front from the back smelled of sweat and disinfectant. Barlow slammed the door shut. Through the window, Harlan could see his truck, door still open, belongings scattered across the road, the gym bag in the dirt, the worksheets from the kids' program blowing gently in the evening breeze. He looked down at his wrists, at the handcuffs. These same hands had been worn raw, pulling two Marines out of a kill zone. Now they were locked in steel in the back of a police car in his own country. Barlow leaned against his cruiser and began writing up the charges: resisting arrest, suspicious activity, possession of a suspected stolen item. All of it fabricated. Every single word. But the worst night of Deputy Barlow's life had not even started yet, because Harlan Vale still had one phone call, and the number he was about to dial was going to bring something to that station that Clyde Barlow could never talk his way out of. At the Haverford County Sheriff's Station, Harlan sat on a metal bench inside a holding cell. His wrists were red from the cuffs. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a faint, constant hum that drilled into the silence. A deputy he had never seen before slid a phone across the counter. "You get one call." Harlan picked up the phone. He did not dial a lawyer. He did not dial his mother. He scrolled to a contact saved under a single word: General. The line rang twice. Vale. The voice on the other end was deep, measured. The kind of voice that had commanded thousands of Marines across decades of service. "Sir, I'm at the Haverford County Sheriff's Station. I've been arrested." A pause. 3 full seconds of silence. When you have known a man like Sterling Hawthorne long enough, you learn that his silences say more than most people's speeches. Arrested for what? Driving through a white neighborhood, sir. They searched my truck without cause. They found the medal. Called it a gang medallion. I've been charged with resisting arrest and suspicious activity. Neither happened. Another silence. Longer this time. Harlan could hear Hawthorne breathing through his nose. Slow. Controlled. The way a man breathes when he is containing something enormous. Don't say another word to anyone. Not one word. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Lieutenant General Sterling Hawthorne, 4 stars, Commanding General of Marine Forces Command, was supposed to be farther away. But that evening, he happened to be closer. He had attended a veterans fundraiser and was already in the car heading back. Haverford County was only a short drive from his current location. He told his driver to turn around. Back at the station, time moved like cold honey. Harlan sat in the holding cell with his hands on his knees. He did not speak, did not ask for water, did not complain. The deputies at the front desk kept glancing at him the way people glance at something they do not quite understand. Barlow sat at his desk filling out paperwork, confident, relaxed. He cracked a joke to another deputy about the Marine he had picked up in Briarwood. Guy had some kind of fake medal in his glove box, probably got it off eBay. The deputy laughed. Lawson, sitting 3 desks away, did not. Headlights swept across the front windows of the station. A black government SUV pulled into the lot. Then a second vehicle behind it. Both doors opened at the same time. General Sterling Hawthorne stepped out. Full dress uniform, dark blue jacket with gold buttons, 4 silver stars gleaming on each shoulder, a chest full of ribbons, row after row of them, representing a lifetime of service to the United States of America. His cover sat perfectly on his head. His shoes reflected the parking lot lights. 2 Marine aides flanked him, both in dress uniforms, both walking in perfect step. Hawthorne pushed through the front door of the station as if he owned the building. The glass rattled in the frame. The deputy at the front desk, a young woman who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up and froze. Her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. She stood so fast she nearly knocked over her coffee. Every head in the station turned. Barlow looked up from his paperwork. The pen slipped from his fingers and rolled off the desk. He did not pick it up. Hawthorne did not look at anyone, did not speak to anyone. He walked straight toward the holding area. One of his aides stepped ahead and presented credentials to the desk sergeant. Lieutenant General Sterling Hawthorne, United States Marine Corps. You are holding one of my Marines. Bring him out. Now. The desk sergeant did not argue, did not ask for paperwork, did not verify a thing. He practically ran to the cell. Harlan was brought out 30 seconds later, still in handcuffs. Hawthorne stopped walking. He looked at Harlan's wrists, at the red marks where the cuffs had pressed into his skin. His jaw tightened. A vein pulsed at his temple. Then he looked at Harlan's face. Harlan stood straight, shoulders back. Even in handcuffs, he carried himself like what he was, a Marine. And then it happened. General Sterling Hawthorne, 4-star general, one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire United States military, drew himself to full height, squared his shoulders, and raised his right hand to his brow. He saluted Harlan Vale first. For anyone who does not know, this is almost unheard of. A 4-star general does not salute a retired staff sergeant. It does not happen. Rank flows upward. Lower ranks salute higher ranks. That is how it works, always, except for one exception, the Medal of Honor. By sacred military tradition, every service member, regardless of rank, regardless of stars, regardless of anything, salutes a Medal of Honor recipient first. It is the highest gesture of respect in the armed forces. Generals have done it for privates. Admirals have done it for corporals. It is not about rank. It is about honor. And in that fluorescent-lit police station in Haverford County, Virginia, a 4-star general was saluting a man in handcuffs. The room went dead silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that falls when every person in a room realizes at the exact same moment that something has gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. Barlow's face lost all color. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Hawthorne held the salute for 3 full seconds. Then he lowered his hand, turned slowly, and looked directly at Barlow. "Who is responsible for this?" Barlow stepped forward. He had no choice. Every eye in the station was on him. "Sir, I conducted a routine traffic stop based on—" "I didn't ask for a speech," Hawthorne said. His voice was quiet. That was what made it terrifying. He was not yelling. He was not raising his voice. He was speaking the way a man speaks when he has already decided what is going to happen and is simply walking through the steps. "I asked who is responsible." I am, sir. Deputy Clyde Barlow. But if you'll let me explain—" "Explain?" Hawthorne repeated the word as if he were tasting something rotten. "You want to explain why a Medal of Honor recipient is standing in your station in handcuffs? There were break-ins in the neighborhood. He matched what description? What description was broadcast? What dispatch call described a black male in a black Ford F-150? Barlow opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Because there was no dispatch call. There was nothing except a black man driving through a white neighborhood, and everyone in that room now knew it. Hawthorne turned to the desk sergeant. "I want his body camera footage, both officers, every second, and I want it now." The footage was pulled within minutes. They played it on a monitor in the sergeant's office. Hawthorne stood with his arms crossed. His 2 aides stood behind him. The desk sergeant sat at the keyboard. Barlow stood in the corner like a man watching his own funeral. The footage showed everything. It showed Barlow approaching the truck with his hand already on his holster before a single word was spoken. It showed him shining the flashlight into Harlan's face without identifying himself. It showed the lack of any stated reason for the stop. It showed Barlow saying, "Big, black, and dangerous." It showed the fabricated marijuana claim. It showed him tossing Harlan's belongings onto the road, stepping on his shirt, dumping the youth program supplies across the back seat. It showed him opening the Medal of Honor case, calling it a gang medallion, and throwing it back into the glove compartment like a piece of trash. It showed him shoving Harlan against the truck. It showed him yelling, "Stop resisting," while Harlan stood completely still. It showed him ordering Lawson to apply handcuffs to a man who had not committed a single crime. Every second of it recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. Hawthorne watched the entire thing without moving. When it ended, he stood in silence for several seconds. Then he turned to Barlow. "You called the Medal of Honor a gang medallion. It was not a question." Barlow said nothing. "This man charged an enemy position alone in Helmand Province. He carried 2 wounded Marines across 400 meters of open ground under fire." The President of the United States shook his hand. "And you put him face down on the hood of his own truck and called him a dog." Barlow's voice cracked. I didn't know who he was." Hawthorne took 1 step toward him. Just 1. But it closed the distance enough that Barlow had to look up. "You didn't need to know who he was. You needed to follow the law. And you didn't. Not because you couldn't. Because you didn't want to." By now, Sheriff Doyle Griffin had arrived. He had been called at home by his panicking staff. He came through the door in civilian clothes, looking like a man who had just been told his house was on fire. Griffin was a career politician. He had run the department for years on a simple formula: keep the crime stats low, keep the complaints quiet, and keep getting re-elected. Barlow was his best producer. 3 excessive force complaints over the years. Griffin had buried every single one, but there was no burying this. Griffin looked at this footage, looked at Hawthorne, looked at the 4 stars on his shoulders, and made the fastest decision of his career. Deputy Barlow, you are suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. Turn in your badge and your weapon. Barlow stared at him. Doyle, come on. You know me. All these years. Badge, weapon, now. Barlow's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge from his belt. He set it on the desk, then his service weapon. The metal clinked against the wood like a period at the end of a sentence. Lawson was suspended too. Hawthorne noted, and the footage confirmed, that Lawson had hesitated multiple times, that he had questioned Barlow, that he had recognized the metal. But he had still applied the cuffs. And in the eyes of the law, hesitation without action is just silence with extra steps. All charges against Harlan were dropped on the spot. Every single one. Erased as if they had never existed. Because they never should have. Harlan walked out of the station beside General Hawthorne. The night air hit his face. Cool. Clean. He stopped on the sidewalk and took a breath. A real breath. The first one in hours that did not taste like disinfectant and fluorescent light. Hawthorne put a hand on his shoulder. You handled that with more discipline than most generals I've ever known. Harlan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I just kept thinking about the kids at the center. What do I tell them next time? Hawthorne looked at him. You tell them the truth. And then we make sure this never happens to anyone else. General Hawthorne did not go home that night. He went to work. Before most people in Haverford County had finished their first cup of coffee, he had made 3 phone calls. The first was to the Marine Corps Inspector General. The second was to a contact at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The third was to a military attorney at Naval Station Norfolk who specialized in civil rights cases. The wheels started turning before the sun came up. But it was not only the military machine that was moving. Someone inside the station, to this day, no one knows who, copied the body camera footage and sent it to a journalist. Her name was Serena Blake, investigative reporter for the Richmond Chronicle. She had spent her entire career covering police misconduct cases in Central Virginia and had learned to recognize a bombshell the moment it landed in her inbox. She watched the footage once, then again, then a third time. By the 4th viewing, she had already written her headline. The story broke on the front page, above the fold. The Richmond Chronicle ran it with a still frame from the body cam. Barlow's hand pressing Harlan's face against the hood of the truck. The headline read, Medal of Honor, recipient arrested for driving through white neighborhood. By afternoon, the story had been picked up by every major outlet in the country. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, The Washington Post, The New York Times, all of them running the same clip, all of them landing on the same moment, the gang medallion line. That was the one that broke the internet. A deputy sheriff holding the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States, and calling it a gang medallion, calling it a $50 pawn shop trinket. The clip played on loop across every cable news channel for days. Social media turned it into a wildfire. Hashtags trended. Veterans were furious. Military families were furious. Civil rights organizations were furious. Even people who had never thought twice about policing reform watched that clip and felt something shift inside their chest. The Department of Justice officially opened a federal investigation into the Haverford County Sheriff's Department, not just into Barlow, into the entire department. And what they found was worse than anyone expected. Federal investigators pulled 18 months of traffic stop data from the department's records. They cross-referenced every stop with demographic information, dispatch logs, and body camera footage. The numbers told a story that no amount of excuses could explain away. Deputy Clyde Barlow had conducted 214 traffic stops in that period. Of those, 167, 78%, involved Black or Latino drivers, in a county where the minority population was only 22%. But it was not just Barlow. Investigators found that the 3 prior excessive force complaints against him had all been filed by Black men. All 3 had been dismissed internally when Sheriff Griffin, without an external review. In 2 of the cases, the complainants had been pressured by department staff to withdraw their complaints. In the 3rd, the paperwork had simply disappeared. Dashboard camera footage from other stops showed a pattern so consistent it was almost mechanical. The same language, the same tactics, the same fabricated justifications. Smelled marijuana. Suspicious behavior. Matched a description. The same words over and over, used on different people who had only one thing in common. 2 other deputies were implicated in covering for Barlow's behavior. They had been present during stops where Barlow used excessive force and had filed supporting reports that contradicted the camera footage. Both were placed on administrative leave. The investigation took months. The indictment followed soon after. Deputy Clyde Barlow was arrested at his home early one morning. Federal marshals at his front door. Neighbors watching through their blinds as he was led to a black SUV in handcuffs. The same kind of handcuffs he had put on Harlan Vale. The charges were severe. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. A federal offense. Filing a false police report. Unlawful search and seizure. Assault. The trial lasted 9 days. Barlow's defense attorney argued reasonable suspicion, the neighborhood break-ins, the increased patrols, the hoodie. He painted a picture of a dedicated officer making a split-second judgment call in a high-crime environment. The prosecution dismantled it in less than an hour. They showed the body cam footage. They showed the dispatch logs. No description matching Harlan had ever been broadcast. They showed the traffic stop data. They showed the buried complaints. They showed that Barlow had a pattern stretching back years, and that the system designed to catch it had looked the other way every single time. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. All counts. Barlow stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read. His wife sat in the gallery behind him, crying. Barlow was not. He stared straight ahead with the expression of a man who still, even now, could not quite believe that consequences had finally found him. The sentence came soon after. 4 years in federal prison, a permanent ban from law enforcement anywhere in the United States, and a spot on a federal database that would follow him for the rest of his life. Sheriff Doyle Griffin resigned 3 days after the verdict. He held a press conference that lasted 4 minutes. He thanked the community for their support. He did not apologize. He did not mention Harlan Vale by name. He walked away from the podium and never held public office again. The DOJ investigation named Griffin as a systemic failure, a leader who prioritized statistics over civil rights and enabled a culture of unchecked racial profiling. He was not criminally charged, but he faced a civil lawsuit from Harlan that would shadow him for years. Deputy Reed Lawson was not criminally charged. The footage showed his hesitation, his attempts to intervene, his recognition of the medal. But he was terminated from the department. In a public statement released through his attorney, Lawson said 7 sentences that would be quoted in newspapers across the country. "I should have done more. I knew what was happening was wrong. I saw it. I heard it. And I didn't stop it. I told myself it wasn't my place, but it was. It was exactly my place, and I'll carry that failure for the rest of my life. Harlan Vale filed a civil rights lawsuit against Haverford County. It was settled out of court for $2.8 million. He did not keep most of it. He donated a third to expand the youth mentorship program at the community center. A third went into a scholarship fund named after his mother, the Evelyn Vale Future Leaders Scholarship for first-generation college students from Ridgeway, Virginia. The rest he split between a veterans support organization and a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct. Months after the settlement, Harlan received a letter on congressional letterhead. He was being invited to testify before a House subcommittee on policing reform. He said yes. Harlan sat at a long table in a wood-paneled hearing room in Washington, D.C. Cameras everywhere. Microphones everywhere. Members of Congress lined up behind raised desks like judges in a courtroom. And beside him, in full-dress uniform with 4 stars on his shoulders, sat General Sterling Hawthorne. Harlan spoke for 12 minutes. No notes. No prepared statement. Just a man telling the truth in a calm, steady voice that had once called out orders under enemy fire. He told them about the stop, about the search, about the gang medallion, about sitting in a holding cell in handcuffs while a deputy joked about his medal at a desk 20 feet away. Then he said the line that would be replayed 10 million times. I didn't need the Medal of Honor to deserve basic dignity. No one does. But the fact that I had one, and it still wasn't enough, should tell you everything you need to know about where we are. The room was silent. One congresswoman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She did not try to hide it. So where are they now? Harlan Vale still lives in Ridgeway, Virginia. Same town he grew up in. Same streets his mother walked to work every morning before dawn. But things are different now. The youth mentorship program he started at the Haverford County Community Center did not just survive what happened that night. It grew. What was once a Tuesday and Thursday after-school session in a single room is now a full program running across 3 counties. 62 kids enrolled last semester. Harlan teaches them the same things he always has: discipline, respect, accountability, how to stand tall when the world is pushing you down. But now he teaches them one more thing. He teaches them their rights. Every new kid who walks through the door gets a small card, laminated, wallet-sized. On one side, it lists what to do during a traffic stop. Hands visible, interior light on, ask for badge number, request a supervisor. On the other side, a single sentence in bold print: you deserve to be treated with dignity. That is not a privilege. It is the law. Harlan also speaks now, not just at the community center, at military events, at police academies, at high schools and college campuses across Virginia. He tells his story the same way every time, calm, measured, without bitterness. People always ask him how he does that, how he can stand in front of a room full of law enforcement cadets and not be angry. His answer is always the same. Anger is easy. Change is hard. I'm not interested in easy. The Evelyn Vale Future Leaders Scholarship awarded its first 3 grants. 2 went to young women from Ridgeway. 1 went to a young man from Haverford County who wants to study criminal justice. Evelyn came to the ceremony. She wore her best dress and cried through the whole thing, just as she had the day the president placed that medal around her son's neck. Clyde Barlow is serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility in Cumberland, Maryland. He filed 1 appeal. It was denied. His wife filed for divorce months into his sentence. His pension was revoked. The name that once carried weight in Haverford County now carries something else entirely. He will be eligible for release in a few years. But the federal database will follow him forever. He will never wear a badge again. He will never carry a service weapon again. He will never again have the power to stand over another human being and say, "I am the law." That power is gone, and it is not coming back. Reed Lawson left law enforcement the day he was terminated. He did not fight it. He did not give interviews. He disappeared from public life for nearly a year. When he resurfaced, he was enrolled in a social work program at Virginia Commonwealth University. He graduated. Today, Lawson works for a community policing nonprofit that trains officers on de-escalation, implicit bias, and intervention, the act of stepping in when a fellow officer crosses the line. He leads a workshop called The Cost of Silence. He opens every session the same way. "I was the guy who said nothing. I want to make sure you are not." Sheriff Doyle Griffin's replacement was elected in a special election months after his resignation. Her name is Amara Quinn. She is the first black sheriff in Haverford County history. On her first day, she implemented 3 changes: mandatory body camera activation with no override, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling with automatic external review of all complaints. General Sterling Hawthorne retired the following year after a lifetime of service. At his retirement ceremony, he stood before a room full of Marines and spoke the words that would become the most shared quote from this entire story. "The bravest thing I ever saw wasn't on a battlefield. It was a man in handcuffs who kept his dignity when the people sworn to protect him tried to take it away." So here is my question for you. If you were Reed Lawson, standing right there on that road, watching it happen in real time, knowing deep in your gut that it was wrong, would you have spoken up? Would you have stepped between your partner and that man? Or would you have done what Lawson did? Stayed quiet, followed orders, and spent the rest of your life wishing you hadn't? There is no easy answer, and that is exactly why I am asking. Drop yours in the comments. I want to hear it. I want to hear what you would have done, what you think should have been done, and what you think still needs to change. And if this story hit you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't, because the more people see stories like this, the harder it becomes to look away. And looking away is how we got here in the first place. A 4-star general saluted the man in handcuffs. That single moment told you everything about who the real criminal was in that station. Harlan Vale had already faced death. He had carried men through gunfire. The president had placed the highest military honor around his neck. And a deputy with a flashlight and a bias reduced all of it to nothing in under 15 minutes. That is not a broken system making a mistake. That is the system working exactly the way it was designed to, until someone with 4 stars on his shoulders walked in and broke the silence. Dignity should not require a general to show up and confirm it. It should not need a medal to prove it exists. The moment we need credentials to be treated like human beings, we have already lost the fight. So here is what I want you to start thinking about. What does the oath actually mean if the people sworn to protect us cannot even recognize it? At what point does staying quiet stop being caution and start becoming the very thing you swore you would never be? And how many people tonight are sitting on the side of a road with no general coming? Drop the answer in the comments. And if this story hit you, subscribe. Say it, because silence only works when nobody is watching. Let's make sure they are watching.